operations?
They are not, I don't know how they're kept. I know, but it's the number we take, the 5,000 is what we track coming into the token.
And just on the service centers, can you assure the public that the service centers that are going to be built are depending on the managing correctional facilities as the existing that is? And can you detail that for service cases? As we talked previously, there was some concern that the size of the new centers did not seem larger to have.
No, they won't have to serve spaces there. Many of them will have 4 of them will have menus for truckers, shower, so they're gonna need that. The free size to the services. We have opened up right now. Senator Kennedy was asking us that. 3 are currently open, rest of the world. Another 7.
I'm well, how are you? Just asking about it.
Yeah, maybe 17. One goes up, down up. Sure, that 2 consecutive.
Not today, but tomorrow. Okay. The mayor not today, so tomorrow he's gonna talk to both of them.
Sizes. Different. So, coming by traffic.
He's down here.
Yeah.
I have keys from my side. I don't have.
Okay, sorry.
I'll make it up. Get keys.
That's
I'm gonna give it like 2 minutes for
Never start.
Dustin Anjali.
Should, I mean, by.
It's on that WB, we were at 33. Only 3%.
It's 2 minutes to 6. I don't know. It's going to be late.
You don't have any agendas printed, do you?
No,
It's okay.
it is. It's also honestly, we're gonna have some housekeeping stuff, and then we're gonna spend most of the meeting talking about priorities. So.
Failing all them. Absolutely. See the 6. So he's not being printed. So my question to you is, who has the oversight over the operational aspects of these? Because certainly when users have a problem, they don't direct it to the public-private partnership. They judge the Thruway Authority itself. So who has the oversight over the?
Well, we have the responsibility for maintaining and upkeeping those service areas is with the operator. We have quality control, quality assurance folks on our end looking at that. I'm not aware of those complaints. We'll certainly look into that and act on that when we do get a complaint.
Hey, Dustin.
Good night or good evening.
Whoa. Marini's here, too.
Give it one more minute. Angelique is planning on joining remotely. Nick and Rebecca are unable to join tonight, and then we'll get started.
He's in New York, right?
I mean, I think
And that looks like Road Library, but I'm not.
Oh, that's it is.
Columbia.
Yeah, that is a Columbia.
No, but I'm saying the grass is so green.
No, that's it's a screensaver.
Oh,
It is certainly a Zoom background. It's not.
when I was in high school, I used to use that library every Saturday and Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't have, different than now. They give you, you gave them your library card, they give you books from the stacks.
Oh. Okay, we'll get started. So hello, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. So our agenda is pretty simple. I'll begin with some housekeeping stuff. We'll touch base briefly about subcommittees, and then we're going to spend the bulk of today having a conversation about our key values. They're going to kind of guide what our work is for the year. So first thing is I want to check in about whether this meeting time is working for people. We are hybrid, so we have that capability. We originally, the way we were set up, do not have to follow public meeting laws, did some reevaluation, and now we do. So if we have to have votes, we think that's being quorum. We're still trying to figure out how that relates to HCPA, since at the end of the day, they have the final say over what we do anyways. So we're still exploring that. But also HCPA moved their monthly meetings to now be the first Tuesday of the month, which means they always follow our meeting. So if we have to reschedule or something, that doesn't really give us time before they have to meet. And so, for example, if we're getting something approved by them to like fund something, whatever, it gives us, like, we couldn't even reschedule the next day because you have to give 24-hour notice. So that I don't think is a great combo of being the day before they meet. The other thing is that, as we've seen for the past year, a lot of holidays fall on the first Monday of the month. So I'm just curious if the time is working for you guys, or if you want to change it. I'm open.
Works for me, but
Works for me. The way it is. I'm flexible.
Would you guys have any, that since it works for them, okay. So you all for HHA, you meet the third Monday of the month?
Yes,
Okay. Do you think,
other than when there's holidays. So
Yeah.
this meeting, month, we're meeting the last.
okay. Okay, so
Second Sunday on Monday is informal meeting.
it's informal, right? And then the fourth Monday of the month,
To be open, I think.
I mean, when you get into like the end of the year, you've got more conflicts, but. So what do y'all think? Do you think it's problematic in the day before HCPA, or do you think it's better just to keep it the way we have it?
if you had it the last Monday, you'd be ahead of them by
Yeah,
1 week, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's good. The last week.
yeah,
Monday.
but that won't work for you sometimes, right?
Sometimes, right. When they're holidays in the third Monday.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna, Dustin, what do you think about the fourth Monday of the month? Does that work for you?
Honestly, every time works. It works.
Okay. Okay. So let me run that by the other folks who aren't here, and then I'll get back to us. We wouldn't meet in February anyways.
Okay.
So I think we probably end up honestly meeting at the end of March.
Okay.
If that be the case, and I'll probably be meeting with some of the subcommittees in between. So tentatively, we'll move to the fourth Monday of the month. But then I'll confirm that in a follow-up. Well, thanks. And I'm gonna get clarified about what and when we need to have in person for. Cool. The Hudson Roots item we can skip. Because we don't have a quorum in person, so we'll talk about that with HCPA tomorrow. So subcommittees, Jeffrey, Rebecca, and I met for the funding subcommittee. We basically did an overview of what our goals are for how much long-term funds we need for the next couple of years, and kind of looking at different ways to public sources and private sources to go after money, and just kind of beginning like an intro conversation about looking at long-term funding from the trust fund. Do you want to add anything, Jeffrey?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So I think for future, I'll do a better job of like, when we have that figured out, I'll send a note, so if anyone wants to join and sit on any of those subcommittee meetings, they're welcome to do so. And I'll see if, one of us will wanna, get like clearer notes from those meetings if you want to share them. So right now, we're just kind of thinking about, we have like a collection of grants and revenue sources that we could pursue. And so we're taking the next month or so to kind of think about which ones we think are the best, most viable sources of revenue. And then we'll bring those to the full group to discuss which ones we want to go after. So the goal for 2023 is not to necessarily secure those funds, but it's to have like a solid path. So that, because we have funding through 2026, it's just at a decreasing rate. So we have some time. So this is the year to just build a strong foundation of like where we find future funds from. And then the strategic planning subcommittee, hoping for us to meet this month, maybe the third week of February. Or actually we have time. If we're not going to meet till end of March, we've got some time. So I'll send an email out. I have Dustin, Jeffrey, and Tom on that.
Okay.
So we'll figure that out. Okay, moving on to the main thing is talking about, we've had a discussion about our grant guidelines and how we want to fund things. So our big conversation tonight is to kind of have a discussion about what are some of our key values and some of our key strategic goals. Before we get into that, I wanted to just like discuss a little bit about how we want to go about the grants. So the way we kind of had this sketched, right, was just to recap. So the funds from the Housing Trust Fund, we had as kind of divided into like policy items or programs that we as a group just decided to fund. So for example, Hudson Roofs, and we set aside some funds to go for like policy research. And then we looked at like more competitive, open to the public funds that could either be for like capacity or development. I just wanted to give you guys like a little overview. I met with some of the other cities this morning who are trying to make housing trust funds. So Rochester, Syracuse, Ithaca, and Kingston. And so we're ahead of all of them and that we actually have this created. And they're still in a lot of the like, well, Ithaca, oh, and also Broome County. So Broome County, Ithaca also have theirs like created. The other three are still in the beginning phases. They all have much more bigger pots of money than we do. They're also much bigger cities. But just to give you a sense of what they're doing, Kingston is really just going to focus on giving money to developers to help them like spur development. So if like have open round, developers want to apply for covering like intro soft costs for projects, that's what their big focus is on. Ithaca is looking at like kind of partnering with some of their local, kind of like their equivalents of like REPCOs or Hudson River Housing, and helping them fund some of their work with housing rehab or community land trust or first-time home ownership. And so they're working a lot with like partnering, and Cornell's really involved too. Rochester, since they already have a lot of, they get a lot of entitlement funds, so they naturally get CDBG funds because of their size, they also apply for them. So they have a lot of programs already running, like housing rehab, construction, first-time homeowner. So they're using their housing trust fund to try and do more creative pilot things that don't fit those very regulated federal programs. So for example, they have a project where they're helping homeowners be landlords. So they're residents and they're focusing also on like women of color in the community on becoming landlords. and training them so that landlords, because they have a problem with lost landlords in their area. So they're focusing on like what could we do that's creative that doesn't have all the strings attached. Syracuse is looking at like, kind of like, this is my understanding, it's still in the early works, but I think they're kind of like, what's the problem right now? So for example, they're having a lot of issues like lead-based paint in some of their houses. They're really focusing a lot, like, let's try and hit this issue, focusing really on lead-based paint. So I'm just kind of describing these to kind of show some of the different ways. There's different paths we can go. I still feel pretty good about this for now, trying out the open call for development. One thing I wanted to bring up is that we've talked about this, but I want to bring it up again, that when we open up this like call for proposals or whatever for applicants, I don't anticipate a lot of projects coming in because we don't have a lot of groups doing housing work. Some of the main folks doing housing work is the city and like the housing authority and existing, you know, a couple of providers. So I think it's something to think about, that how do we want to go about and use grant guidelines, thinking like, let's say, for example, like the CDBG housing rehab project you have, right? It's already ongoing. If that could use like $40,000 to like kind of meet all of our goals. Or if, for example, the housing authority knows they have like a project going and need X amount or something, would they be applying with the public and kind of be scored on the same way? Or is it more of like a decision that we look at all the projects, allocate funds, and open it up? You know what I'm saying? Because it's like we're kind of the main players right now is the project by the city. And so some housing trust funds, it isn't open to anyone. It is like, what is already happening publicly and how can we support that? So I want to bring that all up to hear your ideas.
Well, you know what I think.
Yeah, which I mean, also,
I want to be prioritized. So.
yeah,
Because we're a major, you know, vein in the city in terms of our residents, and we're gonna need assistance. So,
yeah.
And then that's not to discard anybody else, but that's just, you know, that there is a need. I'm not being greedy.
Right. And it's also, it differs each year, right? So right now is like huge
Right.
change coming out.
That's correct.
But
That's
4 years, it might look different.
Exactly. And we might be able to modify that going along because we're gonna change.
Mhm.
Anybody else have any thoughts about that? Can you hear me, Dustin?
I can. I honestly don't have any strong preferences. To be honest.
Jeffrey, can you talk about what you're going to do?
Well, right now, we're in the process of acquiring a development partner, so that we can make decisions on properties that we have an opportunity to purchase from the city, to build replacement housing, and ultimately, we're looking to demolish Bliss if possible. That's the major goal of the building. The building is not very viable, and rebuild on that property. So we were just talking about this before the meeting started. Demolition money is going to be, you know, we're going to be looking for that. We may be able to acquire some money from the state and from HUD, hopefully. You know, we actually met with the congressman. He said he wanted to help. So, you know, we'll be talking. I don't know exactly how we can yet, but he did say he wanted to help. So we'll, you know, be pitching things to him and see what they can do to assist us. But I'm certain that there's going to be some gaps somewhere.
Mhm.
Let me make sure you tell that.
That we would fill?
I mean, if you could, yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it's a large, ambitious project, so there's gonna be large pots of money we're looking for, but, you know, one of the things that, you know, was just mentioned, like, there may be some soft costs that, you know, you guys can help out, we can help out with. Because every little bit will help. But, you know, as opposed to the major, I don't know if we'd be able to tackle the major. That would be great if we could, but I don't know.
We don't have
Right,
that. But, yeah.
Right. I mean, because it's a lot of money, unfortunately, to demolish a building.
Yeah.
And then we would have to, you know, prior to that, we would need to get up and running and do replacement housing,
Mhm.
and get folks moved. You know, and follow that plan.
Right.
What kind of housing would you put,
Well, that's one of the things we'll be discussing with the development partner, but we need to know what is able to be built on the properties, you know, based on the literally the ground and things of that nature. I don't know what they're gonna propose. I know that I don't believe we're looking to put another high rise.
Mhm.
Maybe, you know, we're looking for ideas. Definitely want some scattered properties because we want to deconcentrate poverty. But we may have to, you know, erect another building.
what's the
Just
square
small.
footage?
I think it's like 4 acres. Well, where Bliss is now, I think it's about 4 to 5 acres. But there's other surrounding properties that we're looking at too. Which are much smaller.
Yeah, how many of those properties altogether are available? 6, 7?
No, it's more like, they're pieces,
Hmm,
but I think it's about 10.
yeah.
10 parts. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, about 10 small properties.
And the piece that's part of the existing housing authority immediate landscape
Footprint.
is the biggest,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
yes. Yes, I
So
mean,
that would take care of a significant
a
portion
significant portion.
of the placement.
And, you know, in my mind, so. I'm sorry, we, you know, in my mind, and I'm sure in others' minds, one of the best approaches will be to handle Columbia Apartments first. Because it's 15 units, but it's only half occupied. So we could demolish that, move those 7 families and begin to rebuild there. That would be great. My concern though, after that is if, you know, the Bliss is so close to it,
Mhm.
it will be, you know, it's gonna be tricky to then relocate those folks and demolish that.
Right.
Just because it's so close, we have, you know, we have to deal with environmental
Yeah.
issues. and
You need a
so on.
certain radius for
Right.
demolition.
I mean, ideally, if we could relocate everybody and take everything down in one fell swoop, that would be the best, but the quickest way will probably be to do Columbia Apartments first. I mean, and actually, you know, the property goes all the way down to the parking lot, so maybe there'll be enough spacing in between. I'm not familiar
Right.
with that yet. And I'll have to, you know, research that, but if we're able to then build far away enough, that will be good, and maybe do the surrounding properties if we're able to purchase and, you know, get a deal to do that, and then do Bliss.
Yeah.
I wonder what developers need as a minimum to include a building in a scattered project. You know what I'm saying? In other words,
What do you mean?
if it's gonna be basically one developer looking at all these properties at once, right?
It could be more than one, but I think we're looking to go with one. Yeah, it'd probably be logistically better, you know, easier.
So let's say they wanna do Columbia first, I mean, a project there. And then make that little lot across the street. I mean, what would be like a minimum to get, I mean, would they wanna just put up a 4th unit building, or would that not be economically feasible? That's what I
Well,
mean.
we'd have to see. We'd have to see if there's enough land to house the rest of the people. So right now there's, even though it's 135 units, there's a 101 occupants. So if we're able to house them, that would be fine, but we definitely, you know, in my opinion, wanted to build back at least to the capacity that we were at, which will be easy to do if we're able to take down Bliss, then we'll have, you know, I think it'll be, even if we put not scattered, but, you know, just individual kind of townhomes, separate buildings.
Yeah.
So people were not just on top of each other and then maybe 2, 3 stories. It depends on how many apartments we can get.
I got it. I guess my question really was about the economics of those sort of separate townhouse blocks. I mean, will it work? Will it, you know what I mean?
I think it can work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's, so, for example, just, and these are only my ideas, but just to look at it. And I'm not an architect, but the property that's on the corner of Warren, and I think that's
Front.
Yeah, front, right.
Warren front.
That's a small property, but it's enough for like a decent sized brownstone maybe to go, or brownstone type property, which is important because we want it to fit into the construct of the neighborhood.
I think my understanding answer your question. I think from a funding point of view, from the state and HUD, it's a phased project, so like you can get, it's not separate projects, right?
Oh, right.
So it's easier to get funding because it's different phases of
I'm
the
sorry, I
same
didn't
scattered site
understand that.
project. And then in terms, like scattered site usually is more expensive, but the acquisition is already pretty much handled because you since you already have site control over most of these sites. So that takes out a lot of that. So I think it's less economic than doing one big thing, but it's more economic feasible than you usually hear scattered site housing.
Got it.
Is my. So I think that's really good for everyone to hear. What I'm gonna put forward is that for this year, we open up funding and we see what we get from the public, and if HHA wants to submit something, or if I wanted to write up something of like, this is what, you know, the city is currently doing, and then we can review everything together. And like, I think Dustin had said this with the grant guidelines, it's not like you have a 99, you have a 96, you're going to 99. It's like a tool for discussion of like, here's how we scored these things. And you know, if HHA is like a very good case of like, this is gonna help this many people by leveraging these funds, then I think we have a very clear methodology of showing our reasoning. And also I think this will help us see like what other projects are out there that we're not thinking of. And then we can think about like, in terms of voting, what that looks like, if it means like you were to, you know, like not vote or something, like we'd have a descriptive conversation looking at all the guidelines. Or for example, like, you know, Nick has his organization, like a lot of us are involved in housing, that's why we're here.
Right.
And then the day HCPA is the one to make the final decision. And then I think at the end of the year, we kind of evaluate how, like, what we want to do moving forward for 2024. What's, like, you've got like a concern about?
Were we also talking about funding research into certain policy issues?
Yeah, so that's
Okay.
separate.
Okay.
Yeah, so in our budget, that's already set aside,
Okay.
having money for policy. This is the 100,000, I think, that we have for competitive.
You know, the other housing that you're talking about, Columbia, is that what is across the street from Providence Hall?
Yes,
Those houses,
the small places in the back, yes,
They call it the low rise.
right.
the low rise, right? That's a lot of people to find places for.
It says there's only
There's only seven.
Only seven
Only 7 families, right?
They're bigger, that's right, they're 3-bedroom and 4 bedroom.
3, 4, and 5
Yeah,
families,
that's right, big. But that's,
Well, I just want to know, is that any other thoughts on what I proposed?
No, I like that idea,
Okay.
because it's still, you know, we get included, but, you know, we get a fair look at where the money is going to be most helpful. And, you know, I'm sure we'll have a compelling argument, but, you know,
Yeah.
that, you know, I think that's a good, that'll take a good look at it.
I agree. I also think that it'll be helpful too, because we'll get a sense of how this works for next year or next cycle in terms of funding cycle.
Yeah.
And while we have a need sort of kind of now,
Mhm.
at the same time, it depends on where the timelines, you
Yeah,
know, how everything pans out.
right,
So we may get started, but our need may fall into the next budget year. Hopefully not, but that may
Right.
happen.
right. Okay. I'll sketch out like a clear kind of process, what this looks like, and I'll run it by, Chris Shale and make sure that it looks good. Okay, so we're right on time, so 6:30, want to get into the strategic housing plan action goals. So I'm gonna pull them up on my screen, and we can go through them, and basically what I want to hear is just, is this important to you? Is this not important to you? I've heard from some of you, and I know a little bit of what Rebecca and Nick are interested in as well. So, yeah, that's what we'll do. Okay. So again, the point of this is these were the goals from the Strategic Housing Action Plan adopted by our Common Council. These have been what I've used to kind of guide like my work agenda for myself. And this is just to make sure that what we're pursuing with our goals of Housing Trust Fund is in keeping with what the city has, but also we don't need to pursue all these at once. It's good to focus on things, so. Okay, so I'll raise them and then you give me your thoughts. So the first is the goal is the preservation of housing. And under that, there's rehabbing homeowner or owner occupied housing. There's two pieces of that. One is more like minor repairs. So helping people with like exterior cleanup, aging in place. And then there's like more structural major repairs like roofs, plumbing, windows, stuff like that. And then the other two, okay, and then there's also accessory dwelling units. So providing a program or funding for homeowners to add on an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, that would be specifically for helping people stay in their home or to house lower income tenants. So out of those, any that seem like a priority and you don't like?
Well, it's just that accessory dwelling units really requires what's in the next section,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, the other two are fine, you know, that's what it should be, especially the first, right?
So I guess one thing in terms of home repair, we can talk about this more like in detail, but the post out there is like, there's projects like the CDBG, which is going after the big items, the roofs, the plumbing. It also comes with more administrative pieces. There's also programs like Habitat has one that's doing small scale. They just started it this past winter, like adding grab bars for seniors in showers, fixing up like paint, so smaller scale things. Those aren't, it's not a ton of paperwork. There's no lien on the property, right? And so those are also things to think about like what holes are there. From what I've seen, it's everything. But just something to think about in terms of housing rehab.
Would that be inclusive of, let's just suppose someone has a home and they have multiple dwelling units in there and then we would repair them so that they would be able to rent them? Would that be inclusive of that?
It could be. So the city's housing rehab project, the CDBG, is doing that.
Okay.
So you can have a vacant apartment that you want to repair, and then you have to rent it to a lower moderate income tenant
Right.
for a certain period. So yeah.
And so just, I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, is another facet to the housing authority, because we do, you know, have vouchers. And if we can do something to, or anything to make it more attractive to renters to our landlords rather to rent to low income units, we have the vouchers to provide to them. So that will also
Yeah,
be an advantage to the housing authority.
okay, so far I'm hearing interest with home repair and housing rehab.
And is
Okay.
it accessory dwelling unit building a whole new?
Yes.
I mean, it's a good idea, but it just,
No, I mean,
it may be extensive, it's extensive, so I'm not sure how.
right, it requires zoning change for certain neighborhoods and it's gonna get opposition from code enforcement,
Mhm.
but it's, you know, it's a trend and it's one worth looking into for,
you know. I mean, and just looking around the town, there are a lot of unoccupied homes, it appears, that have potential rental units, so. That's what my thinking is.
Yeah. to there, sure.
How about if I put this as like a not for 2023 goal,
Which, for which,
the ADUs?
yeah, well,
Oh, yeah,
Well, we'll get to zoning.
okay, oh, okay. Never mind. Yeah,
Okay. Okay, so rehabbing renter occupied housing, we just kind of talked about this a little bit. So there's looking at small scale, and then also looking at larger rental rehab.
meaning someone else owns a property, like, well, I don't want to put it out there, but. Another landlord owns the apartment, it's already rented, and they needed to, bring it up to code.
Yeah, so yeah, renovating like substandard units.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah,
Well, I mean, already the landlord is collecting rent, so they have to be involved, in this.
mhm.
well, presumably you would have some. The landlord wouldn't be allowed to raise the rent because of the rehab.
I was gonna say it should be a supplement with some conditions.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And that is absolutely a good one. You shouldn't be allowed to raise the rent, to keep it.
But yeah, if you're getting
To
public
keep it
support,
affordable.
right, yeah.
Okay. And there's also looking at, which we kind of just talked about, landlord participation, try and increase participation in local rental rehab with existing and new rental property owners. So trying to get more people renting or rehabbing. So we just kind of discussed this a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay, so goal 2 is about housing policy and zoning. I'll put the context that the city, so zoning usually follows your comprehensive plan because the comprehensive plan says this is our vision for future land use. So that's like agreed upon in a big planning process. And once you have your land use, your future land use, and you can work backwards to what zoning code will create that land use. So the city is like in the process of that, and that we have funding for a comprehensive plan. We're a couple of years out from this though, because it takes a couple of years to do all of this. So just keep that in the back of your head while we go through this section. So this first is about inclusionary zoning. So if you're not, is everyone familiar? Basically a policy that either mandates or incentivizes production of affordable units with a new construction or like conversions. This is something that in Hudson, we're obviously a small city, we wouldn't get a lot of units out of this, but we would get some. So that's a policy that we could pursue. It's also something that this is all policy or things that, we could put more energy or attention into the research of funding consultants or writing of it. It's obviously not gonna be a big ticket item on our funding.
We do have background for it though, because the HUD is trying to, they're furthering affordable housing or fair housing
Mhm.
act. They're trying to, be very aggressive about that and create more opportunities for people,
Yeah,
not just actual partners, but in policy.
yeah,
So to that point, we may get some attention from, HUD and federal funding because we're pushing that initiative.
mhm,
That's a real, very hot item right now.
yeah. Another thing was looking at, zoning codes that would allow for a wide range of housing options. So we talked about this of studying like what an overlay would look like. Or,
Including, changing the bulk rules and all that kind of thing too.
yeah,
Because we do have a lot of currently properties that are currently unusable for housing because they're too small.
mhm,
So what would the bulk?
You have a smaller house.
Oh, I see.
The minimum requirements.
Understood.
It's a leftover of the kind of urban sprawl mentality where you grow that way,
Got it.
so currently, like at our December, January meeting, we said that we wanted to set aside some of the policy funds for looking at an overlay zone that would look into this.
Mhm.
So we can put that there. And ADUs, I think, are part of that. Something else to think about, is that obviously the Common Council is the one who like, makes laws about these things. If there's something like, this is brand new, we have a lot of like power to shape what this group looks like. There is a way that's like, if we were really passionate or believed in something, for example, I'm not saying this, but just for example, like ADUs, if we wanted to pay the consultant to do a study and say, here's options, and you hand that to the Common Council for them to review and discuss, that's helping out a lot versus being like, hey, you guys have to find the funds for this and
Right.
do this
Sure,
thinking.
definitely.
So if there's something that we are passionate about on this, then it's a way for us to think about what resources can be used to accelerate it.
There's a local writer who's done a lot of research on it already.
Yeah.
Jonathan Lerner. He's written about it extensively.
Cool. Transit oriented development. So this is something that, again, we wouldn't necessarily be studying like doing a policy, but if we're looking at applications, we could say, are we valuing things that are closer to transit? Obviously in Hudson, that's Amtrak. And, I've had conversations, Usha's bring up, you're living near Amtrak or using Amtrak, you might be a higher income than if you're a bus rider. People with like lower income, moderate might be more using buses. And typically bus lines change, so people don't necessarily build housing revolving around bus lines. Something else we talked about was, which we should discuss, and also Rebecca brought up to me, was thinking about housing with Co-Green. In terms of like either transportation with it, but also like Rebecca's brought up a lot about working with them to get more housing in their area or on their campus. Think about how that connects to the city. Like how we can help connections between there and the city, and that's where the transportation piece comes in. So just bringing up if this is something important to people, the transit oriented development of housing, then we could add that as something that we're looking at.
Well, one reason I mentioned it to you before is because there's funding available with DOJ.
Yeah,
So
Which DOJ?
Department of
think it's
DOT,
DOT.
sorry, Department of Transportation. There's funding available for housing. It's specified, but it's in Department of Transportation budget. It's earmarked for certain things.
We've discussed before the problem of transportation to the community college. And I call the problem seems to be that the way things are scheduled, how do you get everybody to, you can't just have something going constantly back and
Yeah.
forth. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
not easy to figure out something.
Well, you know, they have that via shoppers bus, that pretty much works on a schedule.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to get to a place an hour early, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, yes, but doesn't seem to work out. I don't, I guess people are willing to conform their shopping.
Mhm.
Classes occur all different times and that sort of determines when you go out. But you're right. I mean, theoretically, you should be willing to wait, spend an hour studying before your class or something.
Yeah,
Means a lot of people have cars, so taking the bus isn't,
okay, next was, live workspace, so the idea of, oops, sorry, Dustin.
Sorry, I was gonna say, I think that in theory, the transit oriented development would be perfect, but in the context of Hudson, I think it'd be difficult to implement in practice for all the reasons mentioned.
Hmm.
Can you repeat, please?
Dustin, would you mind repeating that again?
Yeah, sorry, I was saying that I think in the context of Hudson, I think it may be more difficult to implement. Just that it doesn't seem, to my knowledge, there's not a lot of transportation options beyond Amtrak, and I don't know the bus route or the bus name, but the bus that goes from I think it goes from the hospital down Warren Street. But to my knowledge, those are the only two or one of few transit options in Hudson for us.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I'm gonna go through the zoning ones kind of quickly. So live workspace is like the idea of allowing more flexible uses if you want to live and have a business. Affordable housing design is like creating local guidelines for what healthy housing blend in more, like design guidelines. Something some places do is like they make almost like pattern books or like pre-approved site designs, so that saves on architecture fees and code enforcement fees. I'm skeptical how often people actually use those. When I talk to planners, like it's a cute idea, but not a lot of people actually use them.
Okay.
But converting non-residential land to housing and public uses. I mean, city's already kind of doing that. I mean, it's something that's like if we get an application that someone's trying to convert vacant land, like I think that, like if there's something that's not currently housing and like they're trying to make it into housing, maybe I think that's like a good thing in an application.
And right, if it's a private developer, what would they want from us?
I mean, if they're like a nonprofit,
Oh,
or
okay.
an affordable housing developer or something.
Yeah.
Okay, tax incentives for first-time home buyers. Any feelings about this one?
Does the city have the authority to do that?
I believe so, I think, do you believe so?
Cool.
well, but the home buyer, do they have to be within certain limits themselves?
I would think, right?
I believe so. Or we could also make that part of the law,
Yeah, I think that's very important.
yeah. Okay. Property vacancy tax, so we currently have this on our books. There's been reasons why it's not always executed, some of it being that a lot of the houses that would fall into it are people who don't have the money in the first place. So for example, a lot of houses that are like low-income homeowners aren't up to code, or it's vacant because it's not habitable, and they don't have the funds to rehab it. So there's a concern about continuing to punish people. But then there's also other properties that are just vacant because owners are just kind of waiting for the right time to fix them up.
Is there still a lot of that, you think?
So,
I know there was.
yeah, so we reviewed with Craig, like our inventory of vacant houses, and it's
Right.
actually pretty small.
That's what I
He's
thought.
got 35 right now, which is actually extremely small for a city. When you walk around, you do see a lot of vacant houses, but they have active permits for construction. So this is something that is not as much of a problem as it was. There are like a couple houses where this would come into play, but it's not a big scale of an issue.
You don't think we should work towards a stiffer law?
I mean, I
In
think,
other words, building permit, you sit there forever.
yeah,
Maybe we should have a, for example, when we sold 429 on Warren Street, 427, I mean. We built in a stipulation that if they didn't start working on it at a certain time, there'd be penalties.
yeah.
A lot of cities do that.
Yeah,
Which building was that?
The old police building,
So as opposed to just.
letting somebody buy and sit on
them
it.
sitting.
Yeah,
That you should be developing within a year's time or whatever the case may be.
and that's not in our vacancy law.
Oh,
In other words, if they get a building permit, they don't have to really do anything.
yeah.
I mean,
It's too loose,
yeah.
but I don't know if it's worth going through the trouble of fixing it.
I mean, I think it's worth looking in detail at pros and cons and other options. I mean, an example of like a problem is that getting contractors or like waiting on the lead time with a lot of
Material.
materials is an issue. So it's like, it's worth, I have like the vacant study, vacancy law study that BFJ did. I'm just waiting for a cleanup version of it and then I can share that. Rental registry is an idea of just getting landlords to register the city. So we already have units of 4 or more registered for the fire.
Yeah.
The idea would be that it would help us effectively communicate with homeowners, property owners. I don't think this is really worth our time.
Before, yeah, exactly.
I mean, the other thing is that some cities like to have a pulse on like what is currently unregulated affordable housing, and if that owner is trying to sell it or whatever, like kind of having a conversation that could we find another buyer for you to keep it affordable. I think that going through the headache of like, not the headache, but just like trying to get people to register and all this stuff is okay. Parking requirements, we already have gotten rid of our parking laws, so
Well, more importantly, wait, where are you?
I'm on 2.0.
2.04? I'm sorry, 2.03.
Oh, you took it, yeah. At the end of the month, we're gonna have our parking study
Mhm.
reveal party.
Cool, I'm excited. Okay, next one, housing for public service employees. Looking at policy, developing secure housing for public employees like teachers, nurses, police officers, first responders.
Do you have a requirement to, if you work in county or the area?
Now, they keep, every so often, they've been extending it further. As it gets more expensive with it to live in the city, they've allowed public employees to move further away. So I think I think police have to live within 15 miles, but I might be wrong. It's in the code somewhere. Teachers, of course, can live anywhere since they're, they're not just Hudson teachers. Those are the, well, that's it really.
For me, it would be the idea, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to attract? More.
It's interesting that the commissioner, the fire commissioner, thought that the housing going up on 7th Street would actually encourage more people who would be volunteers. Because many of our volunteers do not live in the city.
When you travel around the county, you see signs at people's houses, a volunteer fireman lives here.
Interesting.
Okay.
I'm not sure on that one. I just, it depends on what the city's trying to do.
Right.
Yeah. Next one, streamlining a local process for the pilot. I don't think that's our wheelhouse. Streamline,
Oh, that's being done, actually. That's been done by the IDA.
right, the idea, that's different than the city, but
Yeah, well, yeah.
I don't think that's the
For the city, yeah, we're not gonna,
wheelhouse.
no.
Okay, goal 3, production of new housing. There's less here. So develop new multifamily properties is new rental housing and also developing emergency transitional supportive housing.
Amazing.
Are these
Isn't it-
priorities for us?
This all the same stuff.
What do you mean? I didn't write this.
It seems to just repeat a lot of strategies.
Well, this is like developing new multifamily housing.
Okay.
Is this a goal of ours?
I think developing new rental housing would be great, a great goal.
And, you know. Provided affordability, provided it's affordable is an issue, but there's also workforce housing that can be created as well, so.
Mhm.
And then transitional housing. I think it may be important as well because you have people who are. May not be able to get into. Our building, for our program, for example, because of whatever. You know, criminal backgrounds or different things, but they do need a start.
Mhm.
And if they're successful in those programs, then they can transition.
Mhm.
I've actually had a case where somebody was they needed help, they were just coming out of rehabilitation and, you know, they didn't have the, like landlord, references needed to
Yeah.
move forward, so.
You're aware there's the project that's in the works right outside of the city that they're calling the Wellness Hub.
Wellness hub.
No. So that'll take care of that.
Well, to a degree, I mean, it's not gonna be huge, but it's, you know,
No,
gonna do a lot of,
something.
Not transitional housing.
not transition. And there's a very limited zoning for that here, I believe, isn't it? I don't even know where it is, it's just,
Where is that gonna be?
So wellness hub is out in Greenport.
it's down in Greenport, sort of back. Beyond the jail, that direction, keep going. Okay.
And then to your question about zoning for like group housing, my understanding is that if like multifamily housing is allowed, you're not allowed to like discriminate against it being used for certain populations.
Okay.
That's what I thought, but that's like Supreme Court cases. I don't know what that looks like on the ground here.
Mhm.
So like in the fifth ward, it might be hard, you know, certain areas can be harder to get past than other neighborhoods.
Yeah, I, you know, can't help it, number. Houses, I don't know, is that considered transitional? I mean, like,
I mean, they're just gonna say like group houses.
group housing,
Yeah. I think traditional has a lot to do with like, if it's parole, they have a lot of requirements about like how many people can be living together and who can be in the
Right.
same place.
And there may be some opposition to that as well, but it is something that's needed,
Yeah.
quite honest.
Okay, identifying vacant parcels for new housing, we've done this already. That was our affordable housing development plan, so I'm gonna do a check mark. Some of these we've done, so rehabbing abandoned properties. I mean, we kind of just talked about this.
Right.
I'm gonna skip strategy here.
Mhm.
Oh, wait, hang on, 3.03, if it's examine the feasibility of a community land trust. I think that's important.
There you go. Yep.
Tom's nodding,
Hmm?
you're nodding,
Yeah, no, I agree.
okay.
I just have a thought though about that empty house that sits up near the water treatment plant.
Mhm.
You know, we should be doing something with that,
Yeah,
even if we build up around it a little bit, you know, or
Mhm.
something.
cool.
Maybe we could pay to do some preliminary work for it. Because right now it would have to be subdivided up there,
Yeah.
because it's part of the property for the water plot. They would have to have it surveyed and
Mhm.
all that stuff.
And writing this down.
Hmm,
I like that, writing it down.
okay,
Smart growth principles is the idea of compact development, not sprawling, mixing land uses. I don't think this is like something that our board needs to be pursuing. Okay.
I agree, but
and
Michelle,
then-
can I make one comment? I agree with that, because I think it seems less feasible, especially for long term, but I do like the idea of centering that, like if we can commingle, you know, development of new affordable housing, you know, with the idea of that new affordable housing having smart growth principles,
Hmm. Cool.
if possible.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, and then our last goal is programs and partnerships. So this is also something that doesn't always take funding, but takes willpower and
Yeah.
energy. So some of these we have kind of done, so the housing task force, is kind of disbanded because I exist now. So this was like 2018 before there was a housing
yeah,
person.
that was the one, that was just to develop the shop.
Yeah, so that we can cross off. City council liaison is Tom, really?
Really, okay, okay,
I mean, you're on this board.
okay.
But I mean, if you want something more formal, and then we also have Ryan and Dominic are on ECPI. So that's housing connections to there. Housing education plan, I think it's the idea that there's gonna be turnover, and so kind of bringing all the information together in one place for when that turnover happens.
Yeah, I think that's important. Do you know we have it right?
Housing coordinator, check. That's me. So we got that, and we also have a fair housing officer.
Mhm.
Funding. This is pursuing funding for affordable housing.
And we're working on
Yeah, so I've heard that's important.
it. Mhm.
So clearinghouse is like a one-stop shop to help people. This is interesting, I think, in terms of, there's two ways of looking at it. One is like connecting people to housing. I think that's kind of being done, but it's like if you need housing, you call up HHA, you call up St. Catherine's, you call up, you know, Catholic Charities. Something to think about. I don't know if we need it right now, but down the road, once we have like Depot District, once we have the Kearney, I think there is worth thinking about like a kind of a combined source of like what waiting lists look like, what marketing looks like for apartments. I don't think that's something to tackle this year, though.
Okay, in addition, though, we could use, I think something that should be incorporated in this is some type of landlord empowerment. Some of the pain points that landlords have in dealing with Section 8, which make it unattractive for them. You know, maybe we can work on something that makes it more attractive so that they can actually rent to Section 8, you know, voucher holders and things like that. Or, you know, kind of a place to kind of hear out what their concerns are, so they don't just drop out of the program as opposed to.
Yeah.
So could that be incorporated with a fair housing officer,
Um,
clearinghouse and?
I would say no, because fair housing, they literally more so represent the interests of the tenant.
Yeah.
And that's one of the pain points for landlords. It seems to be bureaucracy, get in there. Not that we have that here, but you know, getting paid on time, and then what do they do when there's situations with residents that are not that are difficult, or you know, things of that nature. So. But if there can be some type of meeting of the minds, and you know, how we hear them out, try to mitigate those circumstances so that we can keep it viable, and landlords want to make money, so.
Yeah. And then another part of this clearinghouse is like, I mean, definitely, I think what we're doing and continue to do is like, the city, the affordable housing development plan that's got a lot of data, and we're gonna like in this board, like one of my goals and roles is to keep updating data and like open properties and stuff, so that's some of it. But then also, this is like a little related, but getting like a local, an LPI, like a RPC, like a rural preservation company. Like Galvin is a neighborhood preservation company, so they based in Hudson. They get NPC funding from the state for housing rehab, but it's limited of what they can do, and there tend to be, their funding is usually all used up and they have waiting lists. And then Columbia Opportunities has some weatherization funds, but they have a waiting list and their funds is used up. So getting another organization here, like a REPCO, like a Hudson River Housing, like the ones they have in like Saratoga and Albany, who is like, has greater capacity for receiving more funds for these housing rehabs and homeownership counseling and stuff like
And
that.
how do you get them here?
So I've been talking. I've been talking to them, and my understanding is like a lot of them are interested, but they don't have the capacity. So I've started conversations with Hinchy's office about like what could be done in helping that. And is it a matter of like, because like a lot of their funding has come from the state, but it's by county. So a lot of them have like, they received, Ulster County, Dutchess County, but Columbia County haven't been, that's a whole new thing to apply for. And I think there's kind of like a threshold of like, how much staff do you need? It's like that, do I have to hire new people? Was there enough money to hire new people, or just adding a lot more work on my current staff? So
Can you put that forth to the new county group?
yeah. This is something I'm like very interested in tackling this year.
Yeah, I think that would be very beneficial.
Yeah. And I think,
Test their real willingness to do something about
right.
housing on the county level as well.
And if it's something that's like, if we can help find office space or, like what could we do to make this more attractive or easier for them to come here?
Where that that new housing person for the county, where's his office now?
So Chris Brown is the new housing coordinator. He's working under CDC. His office is in CDC. Yeah, and he's awesome. I'm really excited. He's here.
So he's hired by CDC, but financed ultimately by the county, right?
Mhm.
County to CDC, okay.
So yeah, I had mentioned this one last week because I think it's definitely like a county city thing. So okay, it is 7:05. We're almost there. Homeownership counseling, helping homeowners with financial literacy, foreclosure prevention, etc. This exists. Galvin does it. Greylock does it. We could like try to advertise it.
Habitat does that too.
Habitat does it. Okay, housing advocacy, this is like, this is repetitive. Financial literacy, helping like budgeting and programs for people who are currently homeless or at risk of homelessness, helping with housing searches. There's also individual development accounts. Southern Berkshire's had really good success with this. The idea being like, if people put in X amount of money, it'd be matched by a bank or another group, and then they have to go through certain like financial education and counseling, and then over a couple of years, you have, say $10,000 that you can use for, down payment assistance or, whatever rent, but a lot of times for down payment assistance, but. I've talked to Greylock about this, and they would need another organization to like, kind of another party to help own the program, which would be us, not the red tape, but. And then last thing, supporting community through neighborhood organizations. Park infrastructure, tenant associations, collaborating with Greenport and Hudson City Schools, and encouraging community participation and engagement.
Yeah, I don't know if the collaboration line was intended to be. I mean, what does that mean? Collaborate them up with that, how would we collaborate with the school on housing?
Invite a town and school board member to join the Housing Trust Fund.
We've invited school board members to a number of things that they were supposed to, and they never did.
And yeah, I also feel like there already is like 2 meetings a month that are long. So if any of those jump out at you, I know I've heard some people say like definitely in-person engagement is always important. So to summarize, I'm gonna have those out. I mean, the main things I've heard is that housing rehab is really important. New development is important. Things and like looking at policies for rezoning, researching vacancy, and encouraging like smart growth. When we're going through development, those are the big things I've heard. I don't know if this was helpful or not,
Yeah,
but okay,
no, it's important that we try to be consistent with the SHAP goals.
okay. Cool. So it's 7:08. I think what next thing we'll do is I will send a follow-up about moving the meeting time to the end of March. Between now and then, so it's almost 2 months, I plan to meet with like some of the subcommittees and get some stuff done in terms of funding, strategic planning, and thinking about if we want to like maybe hold some kind of workshop info session about this for like or how we want to go about doing engagement and notification of this to groups. So, and I'll like clean up these thoughts that we had about goals, and send those out. Any last thoughts from anybody? Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. And have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.